Most early retirements don't break because people didn't save enough. They break because one decision quietly locks in damage forever. And the most dangerous decision comes much earlier than most people realize. In our last video, we said the first few years of early retirement are the most fragile, not because people suddenly run out of money, not because markets always crash, and not because retirement itself is a mistake. They're fragile because this is the window where decisions become permanent long before you know what you actually need. Today we're talking about the biggest one, the decision that looks small on the surface, the decision that feels comforting when it's made, and the decision that permanently reshapes how the rest of early retirement feels. And that decision is when you claim Social Security. Quick context, we're in our first months of early retirement and doing some travel, so our filming location looks a little different right now. But the decisions that we're talking about today apply whether you're at home or you're on the road. Now, before retirement, most of us have lived with a constant feedback loop. Every 2 weeks, we have a paycheck that arrives, every month, bills got paid, and every year, income went up or down. That rhythm told us whether we were safe. After retirement, that rhythm disappears. There's no paycheck, there's no employer, there's no next promotion. You're living inside your plan now, and that changes how everything feels. This is why the early years feel heavier than most people expect. Because before retirement, you can make a mistake and fix it later. But after retirement, mistakes feel permanent. You might still have money, you might still have options, you might still be comfortable. Even so, the emotional weight of decisions change. A purchase no longer feels like spending. It feels like removing future safety. And a withdrawal no longer feels like accessing savings. It feels like you're reducing what is left to support the rest of your life. And that shift happens quickly. People rarely talk about it. Most early retirees experience it quietly. Those first few years are not just about math. They're about learning how your mindset reacts to living without income. They're about discovering how much you really need. They're about realizing how much expenses feel optional. And they are about understanding how uncertainty actually feels. This is the foggy bridge between working life and permanent retirement. Social Security enters right here, not as a check, not as a program, but as a decision that determines how that bridge ends. Most financial choices remain flexible. You can change investments, you can adjust spending, you can move, you can downsize, or you can return to work. Social Security does not work that way. Once you start it, the amount is locked in for life. It is not a contract that you can negotiate. It is not a strategy that you can revise, and it is not a lever that you can pull later. That permanence is what makes it dangerous during early retirement. Before Social Security starts, everything comes from accounts. Accounts are adaptable. You can choose which one to draw from. You can change withdrawal rates, you can rebalance, and you can slow spending, and you can pause. After Social Security starts, part of your income becomes fixed. That can either support flexibility or it can restrict it. The moment that you claim a portion of your financial future becomes immovable. And that is not necessarily bad, it's just powerful. Early retirees often underestimate how powerful that is. They think of Social Security as a simple supplement. In reality, it becomes the anchor of the second half of your retirement. And that anchor can be large and stabilizing, or it could be small and limiting. The choice happens only once. Most early retirees claim Social Security as soon as they can. Not because spreadsheets tell them to, not because their advisor insists, and not because it always makes sense. They claim because it feels safe. After years of watching money leave their accounts, a guaranteed check feels like relief. It feels like pressure lifting. It feels like finally having something stable. And that feeling is exactly what leads to the mistake. Claiming early trades a short-term emotional benefit for a long-term structural problem. People believe they are protecting their portfolio. What they're actually doing is shrinking the future safety net. At 62, the reduction looks manageable. The check still arrives, the money still comes, and life still goes on. The impact does not show up in year one. It shows up much later. And at that point, when options matter more, at a point where the energy is low, at a point when healthcare costs rise, and at a point when markets might not cooperate, that is when a permanently smaller check becomes a problem. And that is when people wish they could go back, but they cannot. When you claim Social Security early, you do not just reduce the check. You reduce the entire structure of your retirement. The base amount becomes smaller, and every cost of living increase is smaller. Every future dollar is smaller. The gap between claiming early and claiming later grows wider every year. That gap compounds. And for someone who retires early, that compounding lasts decades. That is what makes this decision so expensive. People often focus on the first few years. They say, I just want to reduce withdrawals right now. And that logic ignores the next 20 or 30 years. A smaller check means a higher withdrawal rate from your portfolio forever. A higher withdrawal rate increases risks. The more risks means more stress. That stress shows up later. And this is why early retirees are hit harder by early claiming than people who retire at traditional ages. They live inside the consequences longer. They experience more years of reduced income, and they give inflation more time to widen the gap. That is the hidden costs. Someone who retires at 67 has a short runway. Someone who retires at 55 has a very long one. Every permanent reduction matters more. If you give up a few $100s per month at 62, that difference lasts for the rest of your life. And over 30 years, that becomes hundreds of thousands of dollars. More importantly, it becomes lost flexibility. And flexibility matters most when conditions change, when inflation changes, markets change, healthcare changes, and life changes. A larger guaranteed income floor protects you from these shifts. A smaller one exposes you. And that exposure is what breaks plans. Not in the beginning, but later. People claim early because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. They want to lock something in. They want a sense of control. They want to stop worrying about money leaving their accounts. Social Security provides emotional relief. The mistake happens when emotional relief is mistaken for financial safety. And that relief hides the fact that a permanent decision has been made. Often people realize the impact too late. They discover it when healthcare premiums rise. They discover it when the market's stagnant. They discover it when the inflation erodes purchasing power. By then, the choice cannot be changed. And that is why this mistake is so powerful. A smaller Social Security check means that everything else has to work harder. Your portfolio must provide more income, your tax strategy becomes tighter, and your margin for error shrinks. Your flexibility disappears. Early retirement depends on flexibility. You need room to adjust spending, you need room to respond to markets, and you need room to handle surprises. Claiming early removes that room. It locks you into a narrow path. That path feels safe at first, but later it feels constraining. In video 1, we talked about pressure. We talked about how time feels different. We talked about how decisions feel heavier. And we talked about how flexibility matters more than projections. Claiming Social Security too early amplifies all of these pressures. It makes time feel tighter, it makes decisions feel more permanent, and it reduces flexibility. This is why this mistake quietly breaks plans. One of the hardest parts about early retirement is that the most important decisions are made when you have the least amount of information. In those first few years, you do not yet know how healthcare will feel financially, how markets will behave, how much you'll truly spend, how much flexibility you will want, and how inflation will affect your lifestyle. You're still learning what retirement actually is. And that makes permanent decisions dangerous. Social Security timing is the first big permanent decision that most early retirees face. Once that check starts, you are no longer just living off your plan. You are living inside the consequences of that choice. A larger benefit creates more room. Room to handle unexpected medical costs, market turndowns, inflation, family needs, and lifestyle changes. A smaller benefit removes room. People often underestimate how much peace of mind comes from knowing a large portion of their income cannot disappear. And that peace of mind matters more than people expect. Now, common belief sounds reasonable on the surface. I'll take Social Security early to protect my investments. The idea feels logical. Less money out of accounts today must mean more money later. And that logic ignores how permanent income works. Social Security is not just income. It is inflation protected, guaranteed income. Replacing guaranteed income with portfolio withdrawals increases risk. It increases dependence on markets. It increases exposure to bad timing. It increases stress. And people do not feel this at age 62. They feel it at 75. People love break-even charts. They compare claiming at 62, claiming at 67, or claiming at 70. They look at how long they must live for one option to win. That framing misses the real issue. The decision is not about winning a spreadsheet. It's about reducing the risk of a bad outcome. Early retirees face more uncertainty, and that makes risk management more important than optimization. Delaying Social Security reduces risk. It creates a higher income floor. It reduces how much your portfolio must do, and that is what protects plans. And healthcare costs rarely stay flat. Premiums rise, out-of-pocket costs increase, and unexpected expenses appear. A larger Social Security benefit softens those shocks. A smaller one forces higher withdrawals. And those withdrawals often occur during market downturns. That is how sequence risk becomes real. People think that sequence risk is abstract. It becomes very real when healthcare expenses rise during a weak market. A higher guaranteed income floor protects you from that scenario. A lower one exposes you. A steady, larger Social Security check changes how people feel about spending. They feel safer, they feel less pressure, and they can make calmer decisions. A smaller check creates background anxiety. Even when money is technically enough, the lack of cushion feels uncomfortable, and that discomfort affects behavior. Behavior is what ultimately determines whether plans survive. Now, bridge accounts exist for one reason. They carry you until permanent income begins. They're not there to protect your Social Security. They are there to allow Social Security to grow. Using Social Security early to save the bridge reverses that purpose. That reversal quietly creates long-term fragility. The bridge should disappear. The foundation should remain strong. This decision feels so hard because early retirement removes routine certainty. People feel exposed. They want something solid. Social Security looks solid. The problem is that locking it in too early removes future protection. The right move is often uncomfortable at first. It feels risky to wait. It feels easier to claim. One choice builds resilience. The other builds short-term relief. When Social Security is delayed, your guaranteed income rises. Your withdrawal rate drops, your portfolio faces less pressure, and your flexibility increases. That changes how retirement feels. It becomes calmer, it becomes steadier, it becomes less reactive. And that is what keeps early retirement from quietly unraveling. This is not about fear. This is not about understanding where the risk lives. Most people focus on markets, budgets, and returns. Now, those matter, but permanent decisions matter more. Social Security timing is the first one. Getting it right protects everything else. This is one of those decisions that feels small in the moment, but shapes decades. In the next video, we're going to go deeper into what actually breaks plans in those first years. The spending traps, the budgeting assumptions, plus the decisions that quietly create panic later. This is part of a series, and each part builds on the last. If this was helpful, please like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment. It really helps the channel and gets this conversation out to more people. Thanks for watching today, and I'll see you in the next video.